It is great to be home. I love that drive, the cut in the hill that I didn't appreciate so much when I lived here, but there's some Kentucky people over there. But when you turn that corner and you see the city of Cincinnati, it's amazing. And then I know, because I start salivating, because I think of Skyline, Montgomery Inn, and UDF. And it's been about 5 months of missing those delicacies, so I'm really glad to be back. When Brian asked me to do this about a year ago, I thought, what could a guy who spent his whole life in corporate America teach entrepreneurs, people that really know what it's like to go out and build something from scratch, put everything on the line, and deliver something to consumers that delight them? What could I possibly bring? And as I thought about it, I have some connection that I didn't realize at the time. I think about my career at Procter & Gamble. I spent 6 of my years there working overseas, 3 in Korea, 3 in Japan. When I went to Korea in 1997, we were a startup, a few years in country, a few hundred employees, not much in sales, relatively speaking, for a big company, and they were undergoing a huge currency crisis. We were dealing with things that I never, ever would have dealt with had I stayed in the friendly confines of the U.S. in my career. So I learned a lot about being an entrepreneur within a big company at that moment. When I took the job at Google a few years ago, it was building something within a very entrepreneurial company called Google that I have built and continue to build to this day. So I have some experience there, and I've also been thinking about the fact that over the years, whether it's via acquisitions or partners or suppliers, really getting to know entrepreneurs in that environment, and particularly at Google in the Silicon Valley, where you meet people who do this on such a regular basis, and I've learned a ton from them as well. So I want to try to transmit some of those learnings that I've had from them today. I want to have five learnings that I'll share with you. But here's the thing for me. Those learnings, frankly, are very transferable across an entrepreneurial world or a corporate world. They're very, very comparable. I think what's successful in the corporate world versus, by the way, survival. Survival means just getting by, but really succeeding. To be an entrepreneur, to be a successful corporate person, I think are very, very comparable. But here, to me, is the difference between an entrepreneur and someone who is successful in the corporate world. You guys have to have a lot of faith. You have to have a lot of faith in yourself, in your ideas, in your products, and all those things that come through. And I'm not necessarily talking about the faith connection with God, but the faith in yourself, your ideas, and your products. And so as I share these 5 points that I learned today, I'm going to do it on the backdrop of the fact that there are several entrepreneurs I met that I want to highlight and really have their words echo, hopefully through my words today, but really bring up this point of the entrepreneur world having a lot of faith. I'm also fascinated by this intersection of faith and business. I've struggled with this over the years. How much of my faith do I share at work? Do I leave the corporate world and do something much more faith-based? But I believe, and Brian talked about this earlier, that God has called me to be a missionary in the marketplace. A missionary in the marketplace. And I think the fascinating thing for me and why I believe that so strongly is as I was going through this and really thinking intently about it, the Bible is the most unbelievable entrepreneur guide, success guide in business that there is. When we look at Jesus and what he did with his first disciples, those that we know, their professions, they were business guys. He didn't go down to the synagogue and take the religious elite or the academicians. He took the business leaders, the fishermen, the tax collectors, the people that were connected to the marketplace. And there are so many examples of that in the Bible. It really is, I think, a through line of why the business community can be so connected to faith and vice versa. And I think that's a really important distinction for me. So, which leads me to my favorite scripture, and that's in the New Testament book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 1. And faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you cannot see. Isn't that what an entrepreneur is? Sure of what you hope for and certain of what you cannot see. You know that this thing you're creating, the ketchup, I don't know what that was called. What was it called? Ketchup Bot. It was such a great brand name. I forgot about it already in 30 seconds. But I noticed the rush of people that were going to catch Matt for his ideas, so thank guys for doing that. But, it's being able to really see forward what it is you want to bring to life, but you're not certain of how you're going to get there. I think that is really the summation of what an entrepreneur really does. So let me start with the highlight of a few entrepreneurs that I've had the opportunity to get to know over the years. The first, and if you've been a part of the Ocean Accelerator, you've heard from this guy. He's on the far right. depending on, where you're sitting, it doesn't matter. He's on the far right. His name's Elias Roman. Elias was a college student at Brown, and he had his life mapped out. He was going to be a consultant. He was going to see across many industries, and eventually he was going to go off and do his own thing. So he took his job as a consultant before the Christmas holiday, came back, and these are two of his roommates. As they were sitting around pondering the big thoughts of the day, they said, gosh, the thing that's bugging me the most, that keeps me awake at night, is I'm doing something illegal by downloading music online that I should be paying those artists for. I'm stealing music. How do we solve the problem of stealing music? Right? Who has downloaded a song illegally on the internet? Just out of curiosity. Wow. I thought everybody would raise their hands. All right, yeah. You can be truthful. It's church. You can say, you can raise your hands. It's all right. Nobody's judging you in here. But they really said, how do we solve this? And so over the course of the next few months, instead of going and taking the consulting job, they hired some tech students and paid them in pizza and beer at Brown to go code this retail environment they called Amy Street, A-I-M-E Street, where they lived, to create this indie music online environment where people could legally download it. It was all based on demand, so it was the scaled pricing of the iTunes store before they actually did that. So they did that, and a couple years later, Amazon buys them. Amazon buys his company, decides he doesn't want to work for Amazon, but the problem that he was trying to solve, this legal downloading of music, wasn't solved by the services out there today, and it was changing because people wanted access. This is where Pandora came from. This is where Spotify came from. It's this notion that you want to be able to have music where you want it, when you want it, in the right context, and they created a company called Songza. Maybe you use Songza? My favorite music service, and I'm not just saying that because Google now owns it. It is truly my favorite music service because it gives you, this is a late Thursday morning, what they did brilliantly is they got coders to figure out what you were doing, essentially. They knew your calendar, they knew all the things going on in your life. So if you're driving home, I know that's a little scary to some people, but if you're driving home, they know you're on a drive home. Do you want calming music? Do you want road rage music? What kind of music do you want in that environment? If you pull it up on a Friday night, they have some of the most hilarious categories, my favorite of which is pole dancing. I don't know what people pole dance on Friday night, but I have not been able to convince my wife to do that yet. I'm still working on her for that. But when they brought this app out, the Apple iTunes store came to them and said, we want to put this up, the App Store. We want to put this up. Within 1 month, became the #1 downloaded app for iOS, within 1 month. Expanded to Canada. The thing was huge, but Elias said, you know what? There's no way I can scale this on my own. My 40 people, there's no way we can take this global and see the vision of what it is, that sure of what I know we can do, and that uncertainty of what I cannot see. He didn't know that, but he said, I'm going to hire a banker. I know the one company in the world that can do this better than anybody, and they're called Google. His vision was, I'm going to sell this company to Google. 6 months after he brought this banker in, which he'd never done before, he sells to Google. He sells to Google, which is now integrated into our Google Music Play Store, and it is the core music product that we have. The next guy that I've gotten to know very well since I've lived in the Valley, his name's Chiwa Chen. Chiwa, he always says, I have a Chinese name, but I'm whiter than you are, is what Chiwa tells me. And he's an incredibly faithful follower of God. He's a venture capitalist. He came from where he was a partner. You may have heard of this little VC firm out in the Valley called Kleiner Perkins. They've been known to find these pretty amazing companies. In fact, Chiwa was the partner who found this little company out of Menlo Park called Facebook. You heard of him? Facebook? Yeah. He was the founding partner. He found that and was the first investor at the firm. He led the discussion around the table to fund Facebook. Now, they also have other companies they've invested in. Intuit, Quicken, QuickBooks, Sun Microsystems, Twitter, Spotify, AOL, and possibly their best investment ever, Google. And I'm not just saying that because I work at Google. I think it was a good investment. But he realized that maybe what he was doing at Kleiner wasn't furthering the kingdom. It wasn't driving things like he knew they should. In fact, he had a health scare with his wife, which really caused him to step back and say, really, what am I trying to do to further the kingdom? So what he did is he created his own firm called Good Water Capital. Good Water Capital. Secular meaning and a faith-based meaning. The secular meaning of Good Water Capital is water nourishes, and he wants to nourish. Because he said, not only do I fund companies, but as he says, I want to counsel and nurture them to drive a set of values that are consistent with the kingdom. That's his stated mission statement. The faith-based meaning of good water is two phrases, good news and living water combined. And that's the name of his firm. He says, you never know who you fund. They could become the next life, world-changing company out there. And he said, my job is to help find them. And he's not just talking about finding Christians. In fact, some of the things you'll see in his quotes, he says, by and large, the entrepreneur community isn't very faithful. They're faithful to themselves, but they're not faithful in a relationship with Christ. So the next is a little bit different, and it's a local startup. Some cheers for Back-to-Back. All right. So Back-to-Back Ministries. It is a ministry that was founded on the concept of orphaned and vulnerable children 20 years ago by Beth and Todd Guckenberger. And this is a picture of Beth, and this is a picture of her husband, Todd. 20 years ago, they had this very strong vision from God that they needed to help these orphaned and vulnerable children. They were in Cincinnati, Ohio. They were teachers in the Sycamore School District, and they felt this calling so strongly. They didn't speak a word of Spanish and decided they were going to go and start this ministry in Mexico. So 180 full-time employees later, 180 full-time employees operating in countries like India, Nigeria, Haiti, and Mexico. They're making an impact on the kingdom. But I especially love the story that Beth told when she went to go close out her bank account to take her cash, $30,000, her previous full year's salary as a teacher in the Sycamore School District. The bank manager, evidently on a withdrawal that size, has to come and approve it. And he said, well, what are you doing? We're moving to Mexico, and I need my money. He said, well, it's probably not safe to carry $30,000 in cash to Mexico. And she said, and I quote, we were naive, ill-equipped, and uneducated in the ways of the mission world, all the way down to what kind of money should we bring with us. So he recommended traveler's checks, which she said she'd never used or ever used in her entire life. So he gives her $30,000 in traveler's checks. They go to Mexico. They're following God. They're becoming entrepreneurs. And what happens is she goes to the bank, didn't speak any Spanish, by the way, goes in and puts all her traveler's checks under the window, and the teller in Spanish tells her something back. She has no idea what she's saying. She takes her driver's license out and puts it under, and then her passport, and eventually everything she had in her pockets, and the traveler's checks kept going back and forth. She said, I understood one word she said, nombre. I knew that meant name. So she said, I went down and looked at the traveler's check, and I wrote the word nombre on every check and passed it back under. So the joke is she should have signed her name, and she wrote nombre. Didn't go over like I thought it would, but she said, that was the learning for her. She was so unprepared, but God built into her heart that he would take care of her. And she said, now the irony is that 20 years later, thousands of orphans later, and by the way, Beth and her husband Todd have 10 kids, both kids they've had on their own biologically and kids they've adopted from around the world. And she said, we transfer millions of dollars around the world to help further God's kingdom. And I didn't even know how to sign my name on a traveler's check 20 years ago. How cool is that? How cool is that an entrepreneur in the faith-based community? So I think whether you're a for-profit or not-for-profit, whether you're corporate or an entrepreneur, the success principles are the same that I want to share with you. So, first is define your life success versus just your business success. Your life success versus just your business success. And I want to show a short clip here about someone who is very clear about what their business success looked like.
In the last 7 deals that I've been involved with, there were 2.5 million stockholders who have made a pre-tax profit of $12 billion. Thank you. I am not a destroyer of companies. I am a liberator of them. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Thank you very much.
So that was, if you remember the movie Wall Street from the 80s, Gordon Gekko, the greed is good speech. And he was defining very clearly what his marker of business success was. And if you've seen the movie, you know how well that worked out for him in the end. He spent a long time in jail. And it's funny, now that I watched that many years removed, doesn't that kind of make your skin crawl? That was the way we operated in the 80s in the U.S. and maybe even a lot like that today. So starting off with what is your success? It's not just about your business success, but your life success. And one of the things that Chi-Hua told me that I thought was incredibly insightful, he said, there are a lot of successful entrepreneurs who make a lot of money, but whose personal lives are disasters. They put everything they have into building this business. They don't care about anything else, and they lose it all. And their personal lives are disasters. He said, I can tell you more cases than not, people give everything to succeed in business, and they lose their soul. He goes on to say, as part of this, that as a false road is entrepreneurs finding all meaning in that which they build. They're hoping to find satisfaction. They don't understand self-worth comes from being a child of God. A product is simply an expression of who they are, which is a valued treasure in the kingdom. The kingdom measures in eternities, while the world measures in quarterlies. I love that quote. The kingdom measures in eternities, while the world measures in quarterlies. And Chi-Hua is onto something here, because he's saying, I want to be measured in eternity. I want to have a life success. I want to have something that's bigger than me. I want to be more important than the thing that I do. For me, very personal story. If you've heard me on stage before here at Crossroads, I've talked about this, and I'm very open about it. My oldest daughter, Carly, was a cancer victim, and she's 6 years old. She's on the right. Lost her kidney, went through treatment, for 6 months, and we weren't really sure how it was going to end up. It ended up well, because she's now going to graduate from the University of Alabama Roll Tide, in December. But what I don't tell a lot is the backstory on this, because at that time in my life, I was Gordon Gekko. I defined my life by how well I did in the business world. When we moved to Korea, I would leave in the morning before my little girls, the ones you saw in that picture, woke up. I would get home at night after they went to bed. I was, at best, a weekend dad. Wasn't a very good husband. My wife was my third priority after my work and my kids. She was my third priority. I hate saying this out loud, but it's the truth. I put everything before them. But the interesting thing was, all of that focus on the success of business almost all went away when I could have easily lost my daughter. It wakened my connection with God in a way that I can't imagine. But here's the thing that I don't ever really talk about. I had no base, no foundation, no life success plan, no relationship with Christ. If my daughter would have died, would I be standing up here today with you? And I would offer up, maybe not. Maybe not, because I didn't have that base, that foundation to work from, to work through really challenging situations. And so for me, having this bigger life success plan and having that relationship with God where, no matter what you're doing, if you're failing, if you're succeeding, it doesn't really matter from an eternity perspective. What matters is your life success and the impact that you have in the kingdom. Second thing that I would share with you is being clear and passionate about the problem to solve versus the solution itself. Clear and passionate about the problem to solve versus the solution itself. Meaning, if you're just focused on that solution or the ketchup bot that potentially isn't working as well as it should be, that solution, if you're not solving the problem of how do I quickly get condiments on my food, you're really married to a solution that will, in the end, potentially derail you. I love this quote from Beth where she says, "The day I don't cry about an orphan, even after 20 years and thousands of orphans later, carry me out of here. Carry me out of here." She's trying to solve the problem of orphaned and vulnerable children. She's not only on the solution that Back to Back has for impacting these lives. She's focused on the eternity of the kingdom and really solving this problem. And that's what her focus is. And I love this. I stole this from Elias. He's the one who said, hey, what I learned is if I was only focused on the solution, when I sold my company to Amazon, I would have never come up with Songs because I would have tried to do something even deeper in the retail environment, and I would have gotten smoked by iTunes. I would have gotten smoked by Google Play. I would have never been to the place I am because I would be married to a solution versus married to the problem. And I think that's the challenge. And I think for me, in the world that I went to at Google. I walked in, and there was a very clear solution that the COO at the time that I was working for had for what I was going to go off and do. We're going to take 100 accounts. We're going to go carve them off. You're going to build these teams around them. They're going to be the most important thing you do. And I was very married to that solution. And I've been there a little less than 2 years. We've had 3 reorganizations of a brand new organization. But if I was only married to the solution, I probably wouldn't be there. Because I would have said, wait a minute, I signed up for this. This is the way to solve it. This is my pre-identified notion. But as we got into it, we said, man, some clients aren't ready. There's probably, we're a problem looking for a solution, and we don't really know, or a solution looking for a problem, I should say, and we don't really know how to do this yet. Where products aren't ready for it. But I really, when I learned to not be married to the solution, but be married to the problem that I'm trying to solve, because the problem I'm trying to solve is the fact that these big advertisers around the world and agencies who support these advertisers, they haven't moved into the digital realm yet. Right? If you use your phone, like most people do, you pull your phone out 150 times a day. You pull your phone. We've done a lot of studies on this. You pull your phone out of your pocket 150 times. Some of you right now are looking at it on your lap. 150 times a day. 50% of your screen time every day is not on a television. It's not on a television. And 50% of all searches are done on mobile phones now. People looking for information and things right in front of them. But yet, so all of this 50% or more is happening, but 20% of marketing dollars are online. 20% of marketing. So the dollars haven't followed. So my job, my problem to solve is to help people make this digital jump and help them see the benefits of reaching their consumers where they are. And so that's the problem I'm trying to solve. I wasn't focused just on the structure and the solution, but I was focused on the problem. And take a look at somebody who's really focused on the solution. It's great. I've seen that 100 times. I still get a lump in my throat every time I see that because he was married to solving a problem with a great solution. But I bet you if he couldn't put things in bags anymore, he'd figure out another way to do that. So find out what that huge, hairy problem is and love that, not just the solution. Third thing is know your strengths and surround yourself with people who have different skill sets. And I love this quote from Beth. She talks about, we're inclined to be learners and are unabashed about asking for help and advice as often as we can. I think a lot of times my pride gets in the way of doing that. I don't want to show that I potentially don't know everything or have every answer to every question because that's not what we learn. We learn to be self-sufficient, independent, but that's not the way I think the world works, the kingdom works, or business should work. We're interdependent upon each other for really solving this. In fact, one of the things I love that they do, she said, we have, out of 180 staff members, 2 full-time employees whose only job is to replicate their model. She said, we put together a package for people who want to do what we do. We tell them to slap your logo on it. Because if other people don't have strength areas in the areas we have, and they can take what we have and still love on kids and really follow what God is putting in their heart, we want to help them do that. We want to enable that, helping others where their strengths aren't. For me, I categorize people into 3 camps from a business world standpoint. The optimists, the pessimists, I like to call them the Eeyores. Oh man, the stock market's going down. I'm going to sell it all and put it in cash. Brian Tome. And I had to throw that in today, dude. Sorry. And then I call them the anchors of reality. The people that unemotionally look at things and just give you the perspective. I call it the emperor wears no clothes people in the organization who tell you the truth, no matter how painful the truth may be, and they don't want to just be the yes person and let you know what you want. I had a guy in my organization named Carlos de Jesus, and he was a young brand manager, brought him up from our Walmart team back 12, 13 years ago, and Carlos, my very first meeting with him, he basically, in front of the whole room of folks, including my leadership team, told me I was full of it, and that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I remember, that doesn't always work in the corporate world when you do that. Sometimes people are written off and, they call it the career-limiting move. But in that moment, I really felt like, gosh, you know what? I want this guy on my team. He's telling me the truth. I need people like him because I don't want a bunch of yes people who make me feel good about myself. I need people to tell me the truth. And I learned a really important lesson from Carlos that I still have today. I load my team up because I tend to be an optimist. I tend to look at the world through rose-colored glasses. But I need the Eeyores, and I need the people who tell me the truth, no matter how painful that truth may be. I would offer up to you a couple of examples in the tech world where founders of companies have brought in other people. Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook. Mark was a young college student when he started Facebook. He brought in a woman named Sheryl Sandberg to be his COO. I know Sheryl, and she would say they needed adult supervision. So they brought her in, and she said, I took the average age of the company up by 3 years when I joined Facebook. One person, the joke is that, they were so young that one person took them up 3 years. My jokes are really falling flat today, by the way. It's early. It's still, my excuse is it's really early in California right now. And but imagine what it's like. You found this company. You're the CEO. You bring in somebody to essentially run the company to train you. Takes a lot of courage to do that, right? He knew his strengths and where his opportunities were. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who founded Google, 2 PhD students at Stanford who write this incredible algorithm to find information online that nothing the world had seen before. What did they do when they realized this thing was taking off? They hired a guy named Eric Schmidt from Novell to be the CEO. Here these 2 young guys are who have no experience in the business world, hiring somebody with experience to help guide them. And Eric tutoring and leading and showing Larry how to grow and lead. Larry became the CEO again in 2011. Last year was named the Fortune 500 top CEO of the year. But Larry, think about the humility it takes to start a company, step back, bring somebody in who can fill your strength holes or gaps that you have in capability, but still is humble enough to learn and grow and eventually take back over the company. I find that fascinating and amazing, a separator of good from great. Fourth thing is be a visible servant leader. What you say and do sets the tone for everything about your company. When I was talking to Elias, one of the things I asked him was, I said, wow, Google comes knocking, you're going to sell your company. Were you thinking about what you do next? Are you going to take this money and invest it in another company? Are you going to be an angel? By the way, we never disclose what we pay for companies. It's not public, so I don't even know what we paid for Songza. But he cut me off kind of midstream, and he said this. He said, when we sold to Google, I was thinking more about what the 40 people who were working there at Songza would be doing versus what I needed or wanted. Kind of stopped me in my tracks, but he created a culture at Songza where he was serving. He wasn't putting himself above others. He was putting himself at or below others, which I think is such a powerful concept. When I got promoted to general manager at P&G, I wasn't 11 years with the company yet, which was unheard of at the time. And I worked in an organization with a guy named Mark Ketchum, who was the president of our baby, family, and feminine care business. And I remember driving home in Japan one night from work, late at night. He calls me and says, hey, we're going to promote you to general manager. And I'm like, wow, really? Are you sure? And he said, are you trying to talk me out of promoting you? And because I knew he had other choices of people more senior than I was, he said, by the time I bring somebody over and they learn the culture and they learn the language and the organization, you're already going to be there up and running. He said, I believe in you. I believe you can do this. And he said, what I need to be asking you is, what can I do to support you and make you successful? I never forgot. He totally flipped it. I was worried about him. He was worried about me. He was serving me. I remember he was the kind of guy in our one-on-ones, he would ask me first, what's going on with my family? How are things going? And he'd always close every meeting with, what can I do to help you? What can I do to help you? What can I do to serve you? One of my favorite examples of this in the Bible, and you talk about each of these points, there's such a through line. In the Bible, the Last Supper, when Jesus has the 12 disciples, and boy, what's on his mind, what would be on my mind is, man, tomorrow I'm going to be hanging on a cross. I'm going to be hanging. This is the last time I'm with my friends, and I would have had a lot on my mind. My wife thinks I'm distracted now. I can't imagine what I would have been thinking that night. So they finished dinner, and they're chatting, cleaning up, getting ready to leave, and this happens. Jesus decides to wash their feet, right? Imagine your boss comes in. You guys have a business dinner, and he says, I want to wash your feet. How would that strike you, right? How would that strike you? He says this in the book of John, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you, he asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Right? We're here to serve. And as leaders of your organization, you set that tone every day. Are you going to be a servant? Because as you grow, there's so many trappings of power and success. It's easy to fall into that. Trust me, very easy. But it's only when you say, I'm going to put others ahead of myself, do you get out of that trap. And the last point I'd share with you is this. Never waver in your faith that it will all work out in the end. Back to that definition of being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you cannot see. I love this from the unknown quote guy. Everything will work out in the end. If it hasn't worked out, it isn't the end. I'm often heartened by that, right? Because you never know, and as Rosabeth Moss Cantor said, everything looks like a failure in the middle. Don't know how it's going to work out. I mean, when you're watching a sporting event, and your team, by the way, I went to see the Bengals play in Oakland last weekend. That was quite an experience. But you don't know in the middle of the game if your team's going to win, right? So your heart's racing. You're into it. You're like, how's this going to end? But that's the excitement. But take that to a grander level of your business or your work. You don't know how things are going to end. I mean, everything feels like failure in the middle. And what I love about the company I work for is we take these huge swings. We call them moonshots, 10x projects. We float hot air balloons over remote parts of the world to bring Wi-Fi connectivity to the remotest places on earth where people don't even have phones yet, because we want people to be connected so they can grow and learn and educate and be involved in commerce and lift themselves up. We created with Novartis a contact lens that has microprocessors on it that you put in your eye that measures your blood glucose levels. Imagine you're diabetic and you have an app on your phone that tells you that you need insulin shot. Imagine the medical applications for that going forward. Your 95-year-old grandfather falls, and maybe in that contact lens, somebody can be contacted. We also brought out driverless cars, and Gandhi once said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And when you look at these projects that Google does, It's crazy, but like everybody laughed at us with the driverless car. Now everybody's racing to get driverless cars. Sensors are on everything. People are sensors in a contact lens. How does that work? How is that possibly going to be something that people use? Now everybody's racing to do it. I think of Elon Musk at Tesla, an amazing car, by the way. Elon Musk at Tesla came out with his car, and people laughed at him. They ignored him. They laughed at him. There was an article yesterday, Porsche's coming out with a top-of-the-line sports car to battle Tesla in 5 years. 5 years. Tesla's been out for like 5 years, so they're 5 years late. But now everybody's racing, and there's no reason we have carbon-fueled cars anymore. I mean, in California, it's amazing how many electric and hybrid cars there are. We don't need to pollute the atmosphere. We have technology available. So it's incredible in the middle of these things. And to show a short video of some of the things that we do around Google, it's pretty cool.
I see the walls, then see them fall. We break through them all.
We want to create technology to dramatically improve the world.
And stories scream against the stream, our eyes watering.
To really transform our urban centers.
To preserve and promote culture online.
To study and be inspired by science.
I'm currently combining medical research and computer science to improve breast cancer diagnostics.
That next generation of smart, powerful women, they're already knocking on the door.
Hey, station, this is Google Plus. How do you hear me?
Soichi, hear you loud and clear. Humming.
We try to push these challenging technologies to transform the world and change people's lives.
Now we're in uncharted waters, and what I'm talking about has never really been done before. But that's why we should do it.
That is cool stuff. I get excited every time I see that. So, this notion of everything looks like failure. I can tell you from a personal standpoint, the last time I was here talking about a weekend message, I shared with you guys that I was diagnosed with cancer and back in February, and I had surgery in May. And this is a picture of my daughter and I that she tweeted out the day after my surgery and said, Perry Family Cancer Club, and I hashtagged, no more members, please. And the picture on the right is I went and got treatment in July, and they drain your body of iodine. They give you some radioactive iodine. They light up places where potentially it spread. And so the picture on the right is a picture of my lymph nodes in my neck that I didn't have to be a radiologist to know that that wasn't a good thing, because they told me that day, 98% chance that nothing else is there. But unfortunately, it had spread into my lymph nodes. Still great prognosis getting treatment. And I remember I was pretty devastated, if I'm honest with you. I was pretty bummed. But a really good friend of mine told me about a week after this. I was very down because I was sure of what I'd hoped for, but I wasn't certain of what I could not see. A good friend of mine told me, don't pay interest on a debt you may not have to assume. And it gave me a completely different outlook, mentally, physically, spiritually, that now allows me to focus on, you know what, yeah, I got this thing that sucks, but people have it far worse than I do. There's people who deal with things that are a death sentence. I have a chance. I mean, I have a greater chance of surviving than non-surviving. So I am certain that it will all work out according to God's plan. And I have no qualms about that. And your businesses should have that same belief. I mean, I've given you some business examples and some personal examples, but God's there through it all. God's there through it all. And one final bit of encouragement for you as you look forward. I love this quote, and it's about a man in the arena or a woman in the arena, not to be sexist, but this was written in the early 1900s by Teddy Roosevelt, and he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory or defeat. So I hope, you clap for that for sure. So, I'm encouraged by being here. I mean, the fact that you guys came here to profess not only the fact that you're entrepreneurs and that you want to learn, but also by the fact that you want to connect your faith to that. And that's encouraging to me as a person in the kingdom. And I wish all of you the best of luck, and hopefully you'll prove upon the kitchen bot. Take care. Have a great couple days, guys.
Awesome. Stay up here real quick. That was awesome. Hey, seriously, was that not the most inspiring thing you've heard in a long, long time? Seriously. Your point, be a servant leader, you're modeling that perfectly for us, seriously. So thank you for being a servant leader, and I just want to pray for you for the recovery that's taking place and for continued healing.
Thanks, man.
God, thanks for Kirk, and thanks for the healing that you're doing in his life and through his family, and thanks for using him to speak to millions of entrepreneurs across the world. And we just ask for continued healing, continued grace, and continued power through your Holy Spirit in Kirk's life. Thank you. Amen.